All right, I guess we'll get started, folks. Welcome to the 2020 McEllhiney Lecture, and this will be given to you today by Jeff Williams. It is my honor. My name is Marvin Glotfelty. I'm the 2012 McEllhiney Lecturer, and honored to introduce Jeff this morning. Jeff Williams, MGWC, CVCLD, each letter means he's more and more important. He began his career in the groundwater industry with the first full-time job in Spafford and Sons in Jericho, Vermont, and that was back in June 1980. He and his father purchased that company in 1984. Jeff's experience has been varied with both water well supply and geothermal and heat pump operations. Like all water supply well industry contractors, he was involved with a family business. He understands firsthand the challenges of working with a resource that customers can't see until it's brought to the surface. The immediate business impacts of regional and national economic considerations and the critical need to plan for all types of contingencies. He became active in the NGWA back in 2006 as a member of the Safety Subcommittee and as director candidate. He has served on the NGWA board and was association president back in 2016. Jeff and his wife, Carol Ann, enjoy boating and family activities. His lecture today, his McEllhiney Lecture, will be running a business or doing a job, combining professional expertise with business savvy. So let's have a warm welcome for Jeff Williams.
Thank you. Am I hot? All right. If I'm hot, everybody can hear me. So I'm talking to all my friends out here this morning, which is what I do most of the time I do a lecture. After being on the board of directors and being the president of the association, I got a chance to meet many of you that are in this room today in my travels. What a journey that's been, right? What a journey this has been the last few years, and I'm going to try to keep that out of my presentation. I had it in it yesterday, but we'll try to minimize the impact of our current pandemic with what we have. I'm a water well contractor from Jericho, Vermont. I'm second generation. My father started drilling wells back in 1964. And I'd go out in the summertime with him and spend a little bit of time out there, and actually didn't do very much other than got dirty at the end of the day and came home. Probably got in his way more underfoot than I actually helped him. But it gave me a love for the industry. And I guess some sort of a reason for hard work that was sort of instilled in me. I heard earlier that, I guess it was in the presentation that we had in the contractors membership meeting, that a lot of children decide what they're going to be between third and fourth grade. And in fourth grade, I knew what I wanted to be. I stood up and I told the class, I said, I'm going to be a water well driller just like my father. So I'm a water well driller. I don't know if I'm going to stay with it until I'm 79 like he is, but I'm a water well driller. So here I am. This is the 2020 lecture. I gave it all the way up until they shut down air travel, shut down meetings and everything. I think I did 13 or 14 presentations in that short period of time. So I was much more polished then than I am today. Let's see if we can get this to go forward here. Did I go two? There we go. There's the street cred, the I love me slide. So as you can see, I've run a bunch of different equipment. I have been on many task groups and committees here at NGWA. I went and got certified as a CWD PI when I was elected to the board. Might have been the year before I was elected to the board. And then shortly after that, I got my Master Groundwater Contractor certification. I thought it was very important that I had achieved the highest levels of certification that the industry had in order to be able to lead this organization. Vermont Groundwater president. I was president for 9 years. I'm still on the Vermont Groundwater Association Board of Directors. I think I was elected there in 1987. So I've been continuous director there since then. The big deal, and what we're going to talk about today, is business and accounting. Business and accounting, right? That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what kind of curveballs we just got thrown at us. But this isn't the first time we've been thrown a curveball. This isn't the first time that we've gotten into something where we really didn't know what the future held. It's really hard to plan forward very far. And we have to plan for the worst and hope for the best. But if we have a good handle on the numbers, we were just discussing this just a few minutes ago. If you have a good handle on the financials in your business and you have the proper strategies in place, you can handle stuff like what we're seeing right now. Because you're not buried in the weeds wondering, can I pay for those extra materials that I really need to get because I'm no longer in just in time. We're no longer in a just in time delivery system. We're into, if you haven't got it on the shelf, you may not get it to sell in time to actually put it in the ground. So everything that I did back in 2020, in 2019, 2018 with my education in 18 and 19, and the lecture in 20 prepared me for what we're in right now. I've got a much better handle on where we're headed. What we need to do as a company to survive instances like what we just went through. Back in the 2007, 2008 meltdown, 2009, 10, those were horrible years in the economy in New England. And I wasn't ready for them. And I finally decided that maybe I needed to get ready for whatever was thrown at me. And who knew over the last 2 years we were going to have this thrown at us. But if you're ready for it, you're ready for it. Bring it on. We got to get through it one way or the other. Disclaimer, use this at your own risk. This is all my doing. I'm the one, this is the I hate me slide, right? There are errors, omissions, disclaimer, so you can listen to me. I think it's pretty accurate, but you can judge for yourself. So, I saw this on the internet. This little cat cracks me up every time I see it, and I saw this on the internet. And I don't know about you, but I've been in that almost same position, and it's not much fun. Me waiting for the driller to quit yelling at the other roughneck for having dirty tools so I can tell him I filled a hydraulic tank with diesel fuel. It wouldn't be the first time that's happened. So what do? Let's get into it. Excuse me. We drill wells, we install systems, we do water conditioning, we do service work, we do a myriad of things, right? We do excavation, some of us do horizontal boring. These are just a few examples of what maybe especially the mom and pop organizations out there, this is what we do. This is the core of our business. We may do other things, but this is probably the core. How has drilling technology changed? Yesterday in my talk, I had some examples of some old iron, some old T4s, just about like the one that I used to run up and down the road. But we go back even farther than that. We go back in the old cable tools, right? And there's still a lot of cable tools in the field today. But in New England, cable tools, in Vermont especially, I don't believe there are any running in Vermont, just because of the geologic conditions that we encounter. We're close to bedrock, and it's hard rock, and they have actually just been priced out of the industry. They can't compete. They can't compete production-wise, and they can't compete price-wise. But that's where we started, 20 feet a day, 30 feet a day. And then we get into the newer equipment. Back when we had 150 pounds of air and a hammer, We can make 400 CFM and 150 pounds of air. Then we went into 250 pounds of air, and boy, was that a nice jump. All of a sudden, our production rates are up. Instead of drilling 20 feet an hour, we're drilling 40, 50 feet an hour, 30 feet an hour. I used to drill 40 feet an hour, 50 feet an hour with an old 260. I ran one of those for a long time. Shanked off a whole bunch of bits to go along with it, but I ran one for a long time. Then we went to 350 pounds, which is where we are today. 350 to 400 PSI is typical. The hammers are rated at 350 pounds, around 900 CFM for a 6-inch hammer. The speed at which we were able to do things made a tremendous impact on our efficiency. So you either got to generate more revenue or you got to cut costs. Well, we were able to generate much more revenue per hour. So we saw some pretty good gains up through there without much change in how much we charge per foot. Very little change for quite a few years because we were able to double and triple our production. So those were cost-saving measures. Additional revenue, less expense. I think we've probably come, in my mind, I guess it was back in the 90s when they came out with a new QL6 hammer. And we drill hard rock. We drill everything from slate to granite and quartzite. So we sort of drill all of it. Philites and Nieces and everything, right? That was the fastest hammer I ever had back in the 90s. I believe that we're a little slower here today than we were back then. So my production rates, I can't figure out how to make that thing go any faster, right? You can only crowd it so much before you start drilling out underneath somebody else's piece of property. So in the economic conditions that we have entered into, it's hard to get production rates any faster than they are. It's never too early and it's not too late to evaluate your business, determine who's running your business, and strategies to plan for the future. Those are the three things, right? Evaluate your business. If you don't look at it, you don't know what it is. You don't know where the numbers are. The more you look at those numbers, the more you dissect your company, the more you look at trends, and we'll get a lot deeper into that, the better you are at managing going forward. I don't have to go look at my P&L and I don't have to go look at my balance sheet because I looked at them Monday to know where we are, where we're going. And I look at those frequently and I do year over year, previous year comparisons. So I know the trends. I know where we're headed. I can see about where we're going to end up. I got a good idea where we're going to end up at the end of the year. And I get a pretty good idea where we're going to end up at the end of the year in October, not in December. So then my purchasing strategies for the winter, you look at these supply chain issues that we got today, we didn't have those issues when I put this together. We got those now. So it's just another piece that, in my mind, I got a pretty good idea where we're going. I don't have to actually boil these numbers right down to pennies in order to be able to know what I've got to do. Who's running your business? We're going to get to that slide. And strategies to plan for the future. Why do we do this? Why does anybody own a business? Why does anybody work? We got to make a living, right? Everybody's got to make a living. Well, if you own the business, then you're responsible for other people making a living too. So your responsibilities have kind of blossomed from there. We like it, and to build equity over time. I enjoy what I do. I'm the happiest when I'm out there listening to that diesel run. Nobody can talk to me. I got my headphones on, and I can just stand there and do my work. I enjoy that. That's peace, and to me, that's peace and tranquility right there. Some of us were born into it. Some of us weren't. Some of us are 3 and 4 generations deep in this. And some of us just maybe don't know what we might do if we weren't a water well contractor. What else would I do that I liked? Well, the grass isn't always greener on the other side of the fence. So who runs your business? Does your accountant run your business? One of my employees told me back in 2005, 2006, you need a good accountant. I didn't realize that I had a leak in my office, and I had to plug that leak. He said, you need a good accountant. I said, why do you say that? Well, I'm just telling you, you need a good accountant. Well, I knew where it was coming from. They didn't have all the information. But at the same time, what's my accountant going to do? My accountant's not a water well driller, not a contractor. Yeah, they know the numbers, and yes, they can give you guidance on reinvestment, and they can give you guidance on, financing, and they can look at your P&L and your balance sheet, and they can give you an idea where you are. They're not the ones that are going to drive this ship. They're the ones watching maybe the radar, making sure you don't run into anything. But you're the ones got to captain this thing. So it's not your accountant, your competitors. All too many times. And it just drives me insane. Well, we can't charge that much. Nobody else is. I ain't buying it. I don't buy it a bit. I didn't buy it before the pandemic, and I don't buy it now. You got to know what you got to charge in order to turn a profit enough off of P&L to cover your reinvestment strategies and to cover your profit margin. You have to know that. You can't rely on them. Who says they're any good at it? Who says they're any good at business? When I look at my competitors, I truly believe that I'm better than they are. If I didn't, I wouldn't run the business to begin with. So be that person. You have to be that person. You have to be in command and control of the numbers, not your competitors. The market. Come on, market. There it is. To some degree it does. There's only so much work out there. So in years where you're turning down work, is that market driving your business? Of course it is. You may get a little more independent. They can hear me out on Broadway now. You may get a little more independent. You may not take that job that you might have taken when the phone wasn't ringing as much. You may have to sort of buck up and take that job. So the market will drive it too. We got supply chain issues now. We got the cost of rigs going out of sight. The availability of rigs going out to a year and a half. They're telling me you can't get Peterbilt trucks. They're having trouble getting that. One little wire in one wire and harness in a vehicle, and all of a sudden you can't get a truck for 12 months over one little piece. So certainly the market's going to drive our decisions to some degree. So these are considerations. Your accountant is a consideration. Your competitors, albeit a very small consideration, they're still a consideration. You're sort of going to pay attention to them. The market, yeah, sure. I'll buy into that. I'll buy into they've all got a little bit of influence on your decisions, but you're the one. And the numbers don't lie. They don't lie. That P&L and that balance sheet don't lie. Those are the ones. Those are your Bibles. Those are the ones you've got to go to, and you've got to be in command of those. So if you see a number you don't like, am I not charging enough, or am I not efficient enough? Am I not buying the products right? Those are the decisions that you begin to make when you see numbers that you don't like. So we're going to understand and interpret our financial information. We're going to go over several different pieces of that information. GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. I didn't really understand GAAP until 16 or 17. I don't know if I ever really needed to understand GAAP, but now that I understand it, it's like, oh, okay, that's why they do it that way. P&L, what's a P&L? Variable expenses and fixed expenses. Valuation of equipment and lifespan, open door cost, profitability over time, planning for the future, and there will be a quiz at the end. 10 principles of GAAP. Regularity, consistency. GAAP is just a way to assemble the numbers in a common fashion so anyone can read them and understand them. Everything's put in the same framework. That way my accountant looks at a P&L, my banker looks at a P&L, I look at a P&L, and we can all come up with the same answers based on the information that's there. It's all assembled the same way. And it's truthful, right? Sincerity, that one right there, is true. Those are truthful numbers. We're not cooking the books. Those numbers are all truthful numbers. And that is more for the accounting community than it is any. But in order for them to come up with a truthful number, you have to come up with one. So what's a P&L? Or statement of income, as it's commonly called. That gives you your profit on operations. So we're talking about if I go out and do $1 million worth of work, and I take out expenses, and we'll define those expenses as we go forward. If I take those expenses out, what's left? What's left for me to put toward depreciation, to offset depreciation, pay the taxes, and have a profit at the other end, right? That's the P&L. That tells you if you're really making money or not. Because if you're not making money on a P&L, you better have a really good investment plan somewhere, because you're going backwards. You're not paying for any equipment because my depreciation's not on a P&L. That's not there. My interest isn't on a P&L. That's not there either. So if you're not covering all those costs plus your profit margin, then you're going backwards. You are living off your equity. The other thing you got to remember is that all costs are variable or fixed, and we're going to cover some examples of those as well. We'll put the pieces of the financial picture together. So what are variable costs? Direct material. Now these are out of accounting books. These are maybe some terms that you may not be familiar with. Direct material is a material that I purchase to go toward that job or to go toward multiple jobs. I may buy 100 pumps at a time. I'll buy a half a trailer load or a trailer load of casing. I'll buy a tanker load of fuel. We break it down when we invoice it out, but we don't probably assign a job to it when it comes in. So those are the direct materials that are assigned to what am I doing? Am I making money? They're the pumps, they're the poly pipe, to wire, to everything that we do. Those are the direct materials. Direct labor. The direct labor that goes toward doing these jobs. And it's not the floater, it's not the mechanic in the building that might go out and help a pump crew once in a while or a drilling crew once in a while. It's a direct labor that's out in the field generating the revenue that goes to either drilling or pump or excavation revenue, filtration revenue in that P&L line item. Because the top of your P&L is going to have several categories. So mine has drilling, has geothermal operations, has pumps, pumping systems, pump crews. It'll have excavation, it'll have water hauling. So it's broken down into several numbers. And I can see at the top of that P&L what the percentages are when I do when I print out a P&L or bring it up on the computer and I do a previous year comparison. I can look at whether I'm plus or minus in those divisions and whether I planned it that way or is it going that way for what reason. So you can start to see that trend. You pick it right up. As soon as you start looking at those, just as soon as you look at it, go, woo, how come we're down that far? Or, okay, yeah, I figured we were going to be down about 50% because we've changed into another avenue of revenue, and I've got this other revenue line item here that might be up 50%. So your direct labor, what you're paying for these jobs. this little pie chart, variable cost allocated to a single rig. I broke it down to one rig, which is not easy, right? I just said I got like 7 or 8 different lines here of revenue on my P&L. But the variable costs allocated to a single rig. And these are averaged over time. These aren't, actual last year, year before. I just did a 5-year average on these. So, at the bottom, if you look right down here, I did a what if. What if I drilled 40,000 feet? What if I drilled 40,000 feet last year and 42 the year before and 36 the year before, and well, I might add a 50,000 foot year, but it's an anomaly, right? So let's take an average of all this and let's put this into perspective. So let's say I'm drilling 40,000. Whoop, got to go forward, boy. Let's say I'm drilling 40,000 feet a year. When I put these variable costs in to this rig, it's $303,000 in 2019 numbers and before. This is, remember this whole thing's about a year old, year and a half old. 40,000 feet, 303,000. All right, I write the $303,000 down. Basically, this is a benchmark, right? We've got to set a goal. Wouldn't be any fun if they played football and they didn't have any ends to it. They didn't have any goal lines. Right? They'd just go out and play football up and down the field all day. They wouldn't know who won. You got to have a benchmark. You got to have a goal. $303,000 is a goal. Fixed expenses allocated to a single rig. What do I know I'm going to have into that? Fixed expenses. So variable goes up with time and the amount of work you do. I drilled 10 wells, I use X amount of casing. I drilled 20 wells, I use X times 2 of casing, or whatever that number is, right? So variable expenses, the ones that continuously occur and reoccur each job. Fixed expenses, I know what these are going to be. I know what that number is. My monthly payment times 12. That's my number. I know what it is. Health insurance, I know what that is. When I get the premium for the year, most generally, except for during the last couple years, everything's variable now, but if you call those fixed expenses, sales vehicle, I know what the payments are going to be on that. The pickup I pull behind the water truck, I know what that is. I know what the payments are. Water truck, I know what those payments are. So again, use that 40,000 foot number, there's 170,000. So I had 303 plus 170. I'm up to 473. I'm starting to build a budget. And I'm starting to forecast what I need to generate for revenue for 2022. Contribution margin. Paul Humes used that all the time. Contribution margin. What? Yeah, I can see Tom out there chuckling now. Contribution margin. What does that operation or that task group, now I broke it down into an operation, single operation or task group, right? Broke it down into a drilling rig. What does that give to the overall health of the organization? Beyond the 2 people's payroll, the sales payroll, and the cost of that particular task group, what does that give to the rest of us? What's the positive contribution we're going to get from that task group? Are we making money on that task group enough to be able to cover our overhead, to be able to cover these other costs that we're going to get into, the replacement of our assets and that stuff? Are we making enough money on that particular task group? I would argue that this industry makes considerably more money on pumps and pump repair and pump installation than they do on drilling. And I have a theory on why. Because we don't look at the numbers enough. We don't break it down and look at them. If we break them down and look at them, we go, oh my goodness, what have I been doing? Why am I doing this? Why do I go out and break my neck every day to lose money with $1 million piece of equipment to put in pumps to help pay for it. Why is that? Because we don't look at the numbers enough. Now, all we got to do is look at the numbers, and the more you look at them, the more you understand them. Fixed costs don't change with sales volume. We just talked about that. My fixed costs don't change with my sales volume. My building, my taxes, all these other things, and those are all going to come into another slide. They're all fixed costs, right? We know what they're going to be. When we get to January 1, we can put down a number for December 31st, and we can be really close, plus or minus a few cents or a few dollars on what we're going to spend on these. Indirect labor. What is indirect labor? We talked about direct labor. Direct labor is the labor that goes to that project. Indirect labor, well, I got a guy in the shop, I got a floater, I got a mechanic, somebody working on, I got somebody working in the yard, and we need help on a drilling job, or we need help on a pump job, or we need help here, or wherever it might be on a geo job, fusing pipes or whatever. I need that set of hands. That's indirect labor. Well, that person in the yard, if they're maintaining equipment and they're just sort of a floater, we're going to put that person's payroll and benefits into indirect labor. And that's going to be basically a fixed cost, because I'm going to put in a number for that person to carry that payroll for the year. Because we all have people that aren't assigned to the same task every day, every day, every day. Indirect materials, those little ankle biters. All the little things that you need a dab or two, or you need a clamp or two. Well, clamps, we actually build clamps per clamp. We get down that fine. Grinding wheels, nuts and bolts, and all the other little things, we'll put together a budget number for that. Based on what? History. We base it on history. Last 3 to 5 years, okay? We're using $5,000 worth of this stuff a year, $10,000 worth of this stuff a year, $100,000. I don't care what that number is. Let's assign it a value. So we begin to, there's another block in the building that we're putting together here, right? The numbers are in a block. We're methodically getting to a number that we've got to generate as gross revenue to cover our known and anticipated expenses. Factory overhead. We don't have a factory. Factory overhead would be the building, the taxes, utilities. We get a pretty good idea how much that stuff is going to cost. When they send you a tax bill, they don't say, well, it's going to be about this much. You know just what it's going to be when you get it. And it's always more than you want it to be. But we're not going to get away from that either. But if we plan for it, we can actually write that check, which is kind of nice. Otherwise, they come and try to take it. And that's not as nice. General overhead allocated to a single rig. So if I take advertising, repairs and maintenance, building insurance, utilities, buildings. Now these are only Jericho utilities and Jericho buildings because I have multiple locations. But this location services everything that rig does. It houses that task group. So there's no need of including in my Sudbury or Montpelier facilities. We don't want to keep, because those support different operations. Those operations would be specifically required to pay for those buildings. Sales, water well sales, pump sales, based on that volume, that's only just water well sales. That's what I allocated to sales. Administration, that's allocated based on the percentage of revenue. So if I'm going to drill 600, let's say I'm going to cut $600,000 worth of work. And I got a $3 million gross revenue for the company. I'm going to carve that out, and I'm going to put 20% against all of those other expenses, and I'm going to allocate it to that rig. That's where it's got to go. It's got to go to that task group. You start to build it up, but you also start to narrow the focus so you can start to see profitability per task group. And this is a lot of work to get it set up and to first get into it. Once you do it, it's unbelievable what you can get from just a glimpse at a P&L or a glimpse at a balance sheet. And you've got the percentages already set. If you're off by a few percent, so be it on a quick look. But don't be off by 10 or 15 or 20. And I'd wager a bet that a lot of this industry is off by that much. Well, let me go back. So now I got another number to add in. Get back here. 139,379. I was at $473,000 and change. We're going to add, putting there another 140,000 into it. We're 613. When I take that drill rig on January 1st and I start to assign it work, I already know that in order to cover all the costs that are going to be incurred, I'm going to have to generate $613,000. We haven't got the balance sheet yet. We haven't got the depreciation. We haven't got the taxes, and we haven't got the profit. So if that rig is devalued, let's say the lifespan on that rig's 10 years, and I may be jumping ahead just a little, but let's say that rig's lifespan is 10 years, and it's $800,000. There's $80,000 a year that I got to add to the 613, and if I want to make a 10% profit on that $613,000 worth of work, there's another $61,000, $62,000 just on that piece of equipment. We're 760? That's what that rig's got to generate. If we're going to make all these numbers, we're going to make it work. That's what we got to generate with that piece of equipment in order to replace it in real time, so we're not living off equity and generate a profit. We went over open door costs a little bit, building mortgages, property taxes, upkeep and maintenance, utilities, all that stuff that you've got a pretty good idea what it's going to be at the end of the year. Open door costs or fixed costs to me. What's going to take to put my key in the door? When I open the door and turn on the lights, those are scary numbers when you look at them on a daily basis. You may have some legal in there. There may be some other fixed costs that you have personally. There may be some of those, well, you may not have a mortgage, so you may not have to consider that. Property taxes, you're going to have them. Upkeep and maintenance, for sure. Utilities, communication. I mean, you're going to have all these expenses. When you turn that key, here she goes. The numbers just start rolling up. Okay, now. This clicker's a little, there we go. Maybe I'm not pressing it hard enough. I'll stand on it if I have to. Is that where it is right there? I'll have to point at that thing. The big picture, gross profit's been carved out. So we're going to take our gross revenue. We're going to take out our direct materials. What's our cost of goods sold? You may be more familiar with that term, cost of goods sold, COGS. We're going to take out our direct labor. What are we paying the people that are assigned to that particular machine or that task group? We're going to take out our fixed costs allocated to that specific task group. And remember, that is a percentage of gross revenue. That's how I chose to do it. It makes it easy for me to look at, to think about, to grab onto those numbers. Minus our fixed overhead, which are our open door costs shared by all task groups by a percentage of task group revenue. Everything is in a percentage of task group revenue when you break it down to a specific rig. There we go. I got to start pointing at that thing more. That's our gross profit to be allocated to depreciation schedules and net profit. Remember, we talked about I'm going to have to generate $613,000 in my fantasy world, 613 to cover all of that stuff. And then I'm going to have to generate another $160,000 or $170,000 beyond that to replace my depreciation schedule or my actual depreciation over time, because a depreciation schedule doesn't really match the lifetime of our equipment. They're accelerated depreciation schedules for a reason. So we get our cash back. We can't forget about reinvesting unless it was last year when I bought a pump truck in 19 and they're telling me it's worth 10% more than what it was when I paid for it. That's an anomaly. Will I take a 10% bonus this year on that pump truck value? Bet your bottom dollar I will. If she's worth another $16,000 or $18,000 than it was when I bought it, so be it. I'll be okay with that. But the next one I got to buy is probably going to be up here even farther. So even though I won this little battle, I got a war in front of me with a whole bunch more little battles in it, because that truck now is $220,000. So the price has gone up 60. I may have won 16, but now I'm upside down 60 if I want to go forward again. So we have to keep up with these depreciation schedules and these lifespan, the life cycle of this equipment, or we are not winning. Profit is not a dirty word. There's nothing wrong with profit. We won't survive without turning a profit. We just won't. We buy too many jobs. I don't know whether I said that in one of my presentations or not. You may read it in the journal next month. But we buy too many jobs. We go out because I don't want Marvin, you're not going to get this job. I'm going to do this job. And I'm going to buy it if I have to. We get that ingrained in our minds. We need to forget that. We don't ever need to think about that again. We need to price that job fairly, accurately, and profit. We have to turn a profit on it, or assume we're going to, which is not always the case, right? When the tower goes up, the problems start. That's when everything goes south. Everything goes way off into la-la land, right? Then some jobs go great. Sometimes you make a little more, sometimes you make a little less. But if you're really looking at it for what it is, you're pricing these projects so that you can be profitable on all of them. So where does this take us? Do you expect a return on your investment? Absolutely. If I took $100,000 into an investment banker, would I be okay if 12 months later he just gave me back my $100,000? And that $100,000 in cash was worth 10% less than when I took it in? Time value of money says $100,000 right now is worth $50,000 in 10 years. I lost 10%. So if I'm not making money on my investments, that piece of iron that's out in the yard, if I am not replacing it and making something on it, I'm not going to be able to afford to replace it again. I'm losing money. And if I have no idea why, if we don't expect to lose money when we invest it in a bank or otherwise, why we would expect we'd lose money on equipment, on hard assets. I really don't. It just baffles me. You guys remember these guys, and they're all over the internet. We're back 2 years ago here now, right? So Smudge and Karen, I need 30 gallons a minute. Tell that to the aquifer. I love those things. They were all over the internet. Valuation of equipment. Schedule assets. Examples of hard assets: drill rig, service truck, plumbing truck, grouter, pump pullers, excavator, any other assets that qualify. So what's an asset that might qualify? certainly every asset that I depreciate, it would go on that schedule. And if I had, let's say I had a pull behind air compressor or generator or something like that, that might be $10, $15, $20,000, even if I wrote a check for it. I'm still going to put that on the schedule of assets, right? Because it's got a much longer usable life. We're starting to talk long-term here. You know, pull behind air compressor, even though it might only be $20,000, may last, you may have it for 15 years. So it's an asset. So we have to consistently look at the value of that over time. That also plays into it. Depreciation schedules. We'll talk very briefly about the Maker's 5-year and a 6-year straight line. Maker's 5-year is an accelerated depreciation schedule where you depreciate that asset over 5 years. The first year, I think you get 20%. The second year, you get 32%, maybe 15%, and then it goes down to 11 for the last two, and you may have a few percent of residual at the end of year 6. So you're going to depreciate that asset, so you're going to get credit for what you're paying on that asset right up in the first 5 years. So what are you going to value that asset at in 5 years? Most of us value those assets at 0. They have no salvage value or very, very low salvage values. So if I buy a $500,000 rig and I depreciate that over 5 years, fully depreciate it, I've depreciated $500,000. Well, what do I have in value of that asset the other end? I'm probably going to have somewhere around half that value. In normal economies, somewhere between 40 and 60% is a pretty reasonable number if I'd taken care of it. So I've got some residual value in that asset. If I sell that asset, I'm going to get pinged with sale of a fully depreciated asset. I'm going to pay tax on it. There's going to be some depreciation recapture. If I trade it, I can bury that value forward. I can pay that tax another day, and I can use the full value of that asset to put toward the next one, right? It just carries it forward. We're going to kick the can down the road. Residual value of fully depreciated equipment depend on lifetime care maintenance, right? That's 40 to 60%. Can I get 60% for it, or can I get 40%? Well, how well did you take care of it? How much money did you put back in it? Did you rebuild a power head? Did you rebuild a compressor, replace it? Did you do a motor job on it? How many hours you got on it? What did I put back into it over time? I'm going to get some of that back in trade-in value or sale value. The IRS depreciation schedules do not take into consideration the real usable life of a drilling rig. Yeah. Well, you certainly can Section 179 a bunch of that stuff, major repairs, new to you, or new equipment. I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can manipulate the tax market with some planning. Right? You got some planning. You can't do it December 29th and figure you're going to beat the IRS their own game. You've got to be ready for it. And if you know the numbers, okay, I can buy this. I'm going to sell this asset next year or 2 years down the road. I'm going to purchase another asset. If Section 179 is alive and well and I turn a profit, I can fully depreciate that asset I just wrote a check for. And I don't have to pay the tax. But you got to be careful about getting upside down. If you didn't write a check to pay for it, I hesitate to Section 179 an asset to gain a tax advantage unless I can see some other advantage to it.
What I'm talking about is if you take a major component of a rig that's depreciated down the road, or even if it's fully depreciated, you put 75,000 into it, you can capitalize that again and depreciate it over time.
Yes, you can. Yes. We did that with a C-18. I went and I didn't know where we were headed going into this thing. I had to rebuild a C-18. So I depreciated it. I gave it a 5-year makers. So and you could do as low as a 3-year, I think.
I mean, I always wanted expensive, but my son's a CPA, and he's real tight with our accounts. He gets nervous when I want expensive, big ticket.
Yep. Because what is it, Tom? It's a red flag to the IRS. And we don't want to send any red flags to the IRS. We want to make them like, oh, they're okay. We don't want any reason for them to take a deeper dive into our finances. So that's probably good information. Investment strategies. Asset replacement. How are we doing on time? Yeah, we're getting close. We've seen a lot of changes in the markets. I'll go through these fairly quickly. We're all much more in tune with them today than we were a few years ago. Piecemeal maintenance. Taking the old rig and just keep her fixed up to go drilling with. What are the advantages? Less money up front. Pay for it as you go, right? Pay to play. But the disadvantages are, I believe, that there's real money spent over time away from other tasks. I don't want to be working on a rig when I could be out selling work or doing work. I'd much rather be doing that than working on one. Diminishing the residual value. Diminishing residual value because that is continuing to depreciate over time. That rig is getting worth less and less and less even though you're putting money back into it. You may recapture a very, very small percentage of that, but you're not going to recapture it dollar for dollar by any stretch. And downtime on drilling, right? I'd much rather be out drilling than working on it. We got into the comprehensive rebuild market. We've got a pretty good rebuild market. Several companies are rebuilding rigs. You might have a piece of well-maintained equipment. I really like this rig. It's been a good rig for us. It's a solid rig. I've taken great care of it. I'm going to rebuild the major components, hydraulic pumps. I'm going to re-hose it, and I'm going to put it back to work, and I'm going to get another 5-6 years out of it before I have to start putting money back into it. Well, 5-6 years is a pretty good time frame to look down the road. 5 years, in my world, 4 or 5 years is a minimum that you're looking at these investment strategies. Tier 4 emissions, you may want to stay away from them. You may want to stay into Tier 3 and not get into Tier 4. You may not be ready for that. Deck engine versus truck powered. There's a lot more truck powered drills. There used to be a handful. Now they're getting to be more and more truck powered rigs out there. They're really mobile. I own 2 truck powered and I own 1 deck powered. I own a T4 with a C18 and 2 30Ks with 15-liter Cummins in them. And I do like having all that noise way up front. I'm not against that. And I ran 12 V71 Detroits for a number of years, and that's why I'm pretty hard of hearing now. So that's why when Chris has to talk to me, he has to holler my name out now in order to get my attention. What is it? Cash flow. You may not have the cash flow to be able to go out and spend a whole bunch of money. You may be able to just tinker that. You may be able to do a comprehensive rebuild for much less than you can do anything else for. And that would prevent downtime, right? Comprehensive rebuild will prevent downtime. So I'm going to trade for a newer used rig, not a new rig, a newer used rig. So there's some of those on the market. There's less than there was. For a while there was quite a few. And last year, boy, that number went way down. There was very, very little good used equipment for sale on the market out there. You may want some advancements in technology, new equipment design, increases production and diversification. You might be diversifying into something else that requires a different piece of equipment. You may build equity faster. You may have the cash and you may have the work to be able to build equity even faster. Weight restrictions. Some of these truck-powered rigs are much lighter, right? They're lighter than their deck engine counterparts. Now maybe we're just going to bite the bullet and we're going new. Maybe you can make the financial jump to new. Maybe you got enough money in a trade-in and your cash flow is good enough. Your reinvestment strategy says, okay, I can go ahead and trade for a new one. Then maybe that's what you do. Tier 4 emissions don't scare you. Is there a person in this room that isn't scared by Tier 4 emissions? I didn't think probably I was going to see that hand go up. Those things it's just incredibly difficult, right? I rewired a 2016 Peterbilt, all the emissions, ECM, engine wiring harness, and the engine wiring harness was finally the culprit. Cash flow, take advantage of financial incentives, Section 179, depreciation schedules, right? If you know your P&L, if you know your balance sheet, if you evaluated your equipment, if you've done the life cycle cost replacement per year so you're not living off your equity, you can make these decisions pretty fast. Reliability and convenience of a new piece of equipment. I love shiny new rigs. And no downtime, I know that's a flat out lie. There's always going to be a little downtime with everything you get, whether it's new or used. You're always going to have a little. But it should be minimized, right? The downtime should be minimized. You shouldn't have to replace major components. There may be some ankle biter stuff. Here's just a quick slide on amortization. So if I was going to finance $550,000 at 5%, 48 months, 60 months, those numbers right there, if you've got a reinvestment strategy and you've planned it right, you may have other equipment that has fallen off from your payment schedule, and that may replace it. It shouldn't be a scary number, because you ought to be figuring that money in. You're depreciating over 5 years. It's got a 10-year life cycle, so you should have 5 years to be putting that money, allocating that over somewhere else. So then if you've got to borrow it back and forth, and I realize we don't have cash flow enough to buy new rigs and new pickups and all that stuff in 1 year, but at the same time, that money should be there. That money should be there. Whatever that schedule is, whether you go 60 months or 72, you can get 6 year straight line depreciation. So you can run a 72-month payment schedule and you can own it in that same period of time so you're not upside down. Finance $300,000 on a $750,000 rig. So $300K, I got a $450K rig, I'm going to trade it in, I'm going to upgrade to $750. Just a few examples of that. When's the right time? That's different for everybody, right? That's all pertains to your numbers, your market, and your numbers. And how do you leverage your company assets to their full potential? Right? What is your usage rate? Have I got that piece of equipment out there running 40% of the time, 60% of the time, 90% of the time? Asset allocation. Those are the other things that you consider when you're going down through here. And if you've written all these numbers down and paid attention, the decisions aren't as difficult. I did this to understand my business from a managerial point of view. I took the college classes and I did this. I embarked on this 2020 McEllhiney and because I thought it was important. And I'm the real winner. There's no question I'm the winner. Because I tore my business apart so that I could understand it. Because I can't stand here in front of you and tell you you need to understand your business when I don't understand mine. So I'm the winner. You've got to assemble and organize the numbers so they make sense. And we're in this to build equity over time, not to live off our equity, not to stay stagnant in our equity. We're in this to build equity over time. That's why we're in business. That's why we run these businesses. Exit strategies, people are talking about getting out of the business and how we're going to do it. EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. That's right off the P&L. Minus whatever I take out of the business, whatever the officers get out of the business. Do I get a vehicle? Do I get this? Do I get that? Who gets this? Who gets that? You add that back in. And that's EBITDA, which is the way, if I was an investment person, let's say I took your business and I looked at the P&L and I did the numbers and you had $2 million in assets. But your EBITDA number was $300,000. Well, the EBITDA number is only going to be 3 times or 4 times. So I got $1.5 million worth of equipment. That means I've got to have $500,000 in EBITDA. I got to have $500,000 I'm transferring off that P&L. over here, or nobody wants this. Nobody wants this business because they're not going to make any money at it. That's why investors aren't knocking down our doors to buy our companies. That's why we're having auctions and selling them piece at a time. We're not making enough money to be attractive to an investor. That ought to tell us something. Benchmarks. Are you replacing and growing equity in your equipment over time? Is your equipment worth more this year than it was last year? Are you replacing it in real time? Are you replacing it at a speed fast enough to offset what is being devalued year over year? Are you using depreciation schedules appropriately to be able to reinvest? And a major purchase is not viewed as an obstacle. I said that before. That $10,000 number or $8,000 number shouldn't stop you from buying a new piece of equipment when you need to buy that piece of equipment. It ought to already be there. It may have been in that pump truck that you just paid off. It may have been in those pickups you just paid off, that excavator, that water truck, whatever it is. Combined, that money should be there. You ought to have that money to spend. I have no idea how to do your job. I run into this all the time. I don't know if you guys run into this. But I have people tell me how I'm going to do my job. And I actually stopped working for those people. I don't work for them anymore. Somebody comes and tells me how to do my job, you go ahead and buy a piece of equipment and you do it. So my customer base has changed, but it's gotten a lot better because I work with people that work with me, that understand that I may actually, after 40 years in this business, know a little something about it. And what's the future hold? Who knows, right? We're in such a place right now that nobody could have predicted this. But if you're in command of the numbers, you know where to go. You know how to adjust, and you know how to adapt. And that's the key. Know the numbers. Always know the numbers. Spend time on your financials. Don't let your competitors or your business run you. You've got to know these numbers. And the better at these numbers you are, the better you can take on challenges like what we're in right now. If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. You have to be inspired. Be inspired to run that business. Be inspired to look at those numbers. And sometimes that can be scary, and I don't always like the looks of them. But I've got to look at them because they're the truth. The numbers don't lie. So let's all go out and be leaders. Thank you. David.
Yeah, Jeff, on the exit strategies slide, you had sort of two options, which was turn the business over to the next generation and then sell the business. Now, under sell the business, you had two examples. There was a 3x times you did it up and a 4x times you did it. Yeah.
So on a business, as I understand, on a business valued less than $20 million, that EBITDA will be 3 times or 4 times, right? That would be the calculation. So I would go, if you had $500 million off your P&L to be able to start that calculation on EBITDA, I'd use 3 times that, which would equal the $1.5 million that I have in assets. So if I don't have 500 million, or you get somebody to go 4 times EBITDA, because my accountant is doing it right now for us, and we end up at about half of what our asset value are. You've got to have that much for that calculation to work, or nobody's going to buy it. Nobody wants it, because I'm not making money enough to be able to replace the assets in real time. There's not enough profit for me to invest in your company. And that's why a lot of our businesses die with the owner, because we're willing to work for less. And if I leave, if an investment company buys our company and I leave, and I'm the driller, I'm the welder, I'm the guy who can run the torches, I'm the guy with the CDL, I can drive the water truck, I can run the excavator, do I have to keep going? If I go, business is dead. Business is worth nothing without me. And that's the sad truth. We're asset heavy. I also will contend that that formula doesn't work as well in our business, because we are profitable, but maybe not profitable enough to be investment quality. That it? Thank you.
We want to thank Jeff. We'll get another big applause here. We want to thank Jeff for his years of service with this McEllhiney plaque here.
You get it, Chris?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.